All right, so here's a real quick look at the project we're going to do here in this animation stagger for Angular. So if I refresh this, we'll see what happens and how this staggering animation takes place. You come in, and there we go. So we have two different things taking place. This here is just a hard-coded array, a list of iterals essentially, and we're applying staggered animation onto it. And by the way, this is also using keyframe animations. And then also down here, refresh again, you'll see these also stagger in as well. And this is all made very easy now in Angular 4.2 Plus to add staggering animation with the new stagger method. Oh, but real quick, before we begin, make sure you check out my site, coursetro.com, where you're going to find a bunch of courses on modern design and development. A lot are free, and the others you can access for the cost of buying me like a 6-pack each month. That's it. Now, also, it probably wouldn't hurt to subscribe here on YouTube, and be sure to make sure the notifications are turned on. All right, let's get back to it. So whether it's a list you're displaying or you have certain elements within your user interface, sometimes you want that ability to animate these elements through a sequential fashion. And so this is where staggering animations come in handy. So as of Angular 4.2 Plus, we have the new animation-specific staggered method that we can use. Okay, so the basic way it works, it allows you to specify a duration in milliseconds that designates when each element will begin to animate. So in this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through two of those most common use cases for applying these stagger animations here in Angular. All right, so first off, I'm going to assume that you already have the prerequisites such as Node.js and npm installed. You know, you can always do node-v in your console and npm-v, and it should give you version numbers. But the most important thing after that to have is the Angular command line interface or the CLI installed. So to check whether or not you have that, it's ng and -v. All right, or you can just hit ng and it'll give you a bunch of information. But if it goes unrecognized, or if the version number here is earlier than what I have, what you want to make sure is to run npm install at Angular at latest. CLI at latest, and the global flag to install it once. And so what that'll do is get it installed and up and running. Mine's already the latest, so I don't have to run that. All right, so once you have the CLI installed as well, then we're going to create a new project. So that's ng new. I'm going to call mine staggering, and then we're going to set the style for the CSS to Sass, so SCSS. Just because we're going to do very light, some very quick CSS work, and I just prefer to use Sass instead of the regular CSS. So I'm just going to pause here while this goes. All right, once finished, we're going to cd into it. And then we're going to run npm install animations at latest. Used to not have to do this in Angular 2, but since Angular 4, they've moved the animations library into its own package outside of core. So that's something we also have to run. After that, we're going to run ng serve. All right, so momentarily this will start up a listening server on localhost 4200, and we can go there on our browser real quick. And here it is. Okay, so let's go to our code editor now. And I have it open. Let's go to our source app and app module.ts file. We're going to import the browser animations module up top right here, like that. And then also take our browser animations module name and add it as an import right there. So we'll save that. And next, what we want to do, we're going to head on over to our app component.ts. So we'll assume that this is the component file that we want to add animation to. So the very first step is down here in our export class. We're going to define an array real quick. So it'll be named items type array. And in a constructor and anything inside of here will get ran once the app loads. We're going to set this.items to an array of basic items, and these are just going to be strings. So off screen, I'm just going to paste in these values. There's just going to be 3 of them. Hey, this is an item. Here's another one, and this is awesome. Whatever. I didn't put any thought into these. By the way, there is a follow-along written tutorial that I'm pretty much using as a framework for this video, and so I'll link that in the YouTube description if you're watching on YouTube, so you can just copy and paste some of this stuff rather than hand typing it. All right, after that, we're going to create two classes, or methods rather. So push item, and we're going to use this to add to the list of items when a button is clicked. So this.items.push, and of course the whole purpose of doing this is so that we can see the animations that are applied when we add to our list as well. And then also remove item, and we're just going to use this.items.pop, and that will simply remove one of the items based on whatever is currently there. All right, so we'll save that. Now we're going to go into our app component HTML file. I'm going to hit Control B just to get rid of that sidebar. We're going to get rid of all this stuff. And inside of here, we're going to make a div ID of container. By the way, I'm not using any type of CSS framework, so everything's going to be custom here just because this is real simple. We're going to add a animation trigger called list animation. Of course, it doesn't exist yet because we haven't defined that, but we're going to set it to items.length. So of course, items, we already defined that, and length will get how many array items are in there. Inside of here, we're going to put two buttons. On click event, we're going to call our push item class that we just made. Add item. Yeah, there we go. And then we'll also copy this real quick, paste here. We'll call this one remove item. And we'll say remove item. All right, so now this is where we're going to add our iterable here. So we'll just make it a repeating div ID of list. We're going to reference that later in CSS. We're going to use the ng4 directive and say let item of items. All right, so inside of here, we're just going to put through interpolation the item, which will give us whatever I specified or hard-coded in that array. Okay, so that's it for this part. So of course, if we go back to our browser, we should have a very ugly result right here. So there they are. And of course, nothing's animating just yet. But before we get to that part, I wanted to real quickly just give ourselves some basic styling so it looks a little bit better, so we can better appreciate the animation when it comes up. So I'm going to refer to the written part of this tutorial here and just paste in some stuff. So as we can see, again, we're using Sass so we can embed these things inside of container. We're giving the container just 2 EMs of padding. We have a list. This has padding, a background color of this, blah, blah, blah. Really, there's nothing too crazy going on. Call, we haven't added that yet in here. We're going to add that a little bit later after we demonstrate the initial stagger tutorial here. So let's just save that. And one final thing, we're going to go to styles.css, and we're going to reference the body tag right here and just set the background color to this light gray, padding 4em, and font family Arial. So now if we save both of those files and go back real quickly, we'll see it looks a lot better. Okay, so if we add item, it all works. Remove item doesn't yet work. We'll deal with that just in a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead back to our app component TS. And what we want to do is coming down here, we need to, or coming at the top rather, we need to import all of the animation specific functions that we want to use from the Angular animations library that we installed. So I'm going to paste that in. You see we're importing the trigger, style, transition, animate, keyframes, query, and stagger. These two dudes are new right there. And of course from @Angular Animations. So next is to define our animations, which of course are always defined within the component decorator. So after our styles URLs property right here, we're going to add one called animations and open it up in an array like that. All right, so the first trigger that or the first animation rather that we're going to define starts off with a trigger, and this is all typical stuff. Going to give it a name of list animation, which we already referenced in the template. And we're going to open this up in the second argument. Now right here is where we're going to specify a transition. And this is going to go from any to any state. So this is why we really don't have to specify a state method. And then inside of here in the second argument, we're going to open this up, and this is where our queries go. Okay, so query is a new method essentially in Angular 4.2 plus. So what this is going to allow us to do is we're going to type in first query, and we're going to define enter. So that's going to say on enter. Then we're going to set the style opacity to 0. And then we're also going to pass in the third argument of the query method, one called optional. We're going to set this to true as it's false by default. All right, so what this does is the fact that currently trigger list animation is added to, we'll see right here, div list animation is items length. So any of these div IDs of list that show up, they're going to have a style of opacity 0 set to them. That's the purpose of this guy right here. So then we're going to create another one. So query, same thing, enter. We're going to add stagger this time with a separation between each element animating of 300 milliseconds. All right. Real quickly, that pop-up is starting to become real annoying. So I'm going to go to my settings and just to uncomment this stuff right here. Have that there. All right. So now hopefully those little pop-ups don't show up. All right. So inside of here, we're going to add an animate function. And this is going to be for 1 second, ease in. And then this time we're going to add a keyframes animation sequence. And then a style. Opacity will start at 0. Transform. We'll start at translate Y. Negative 75 pixels. And then the offset is 0, so that means at the very beginning of this animation sequence. We'll add 2 more of these. This is going to go from 0.5, or from 0 to 0.5 to 1 down here. We'll make this at 0.3, and then this 1. And then finally here, it's so translate Y, this is saying push it up 75 pixels from its original position. We're going to make it go down 35 pixels in the second step, and then back to 0. So it's going to come up. It's going to come from up like this, and then like that. So if you watch my mouse, like that. So it goes back up just a bit. All right, so let's go ahead, and then we have one more query, and this is, well, you know what? Let's just go ahead and save it real quickly, and we'll take a look at the actual result in the browser. So refresh this, and there you go. So just to take a look at that again. Awesome. So now let's get remove item working. So to do that, we're going to put a comma here. And oh, I just realized just 1 second before we want to do that, we need to add our optional true right down in this query as well. And so that is going to go right here, as this is the third argument of our query right there. All right. So next, what we want to do is, just to save ourselves some time, copy this. We're going to paste one right here. And we're going to change this to leave. All right, so this will be applied to when any of these div list ID elements leave the DOM. All right, so for this, we're just going to leave the same right here. For this is all the same as well. And we'll just reverse the order. So it's going to go from an opacity of 1 because that's what state it will be currently in. And then this one down here will be 0. And this up here is going to be 0. This right here will be 35 pixels, just the same. And then we'll put negative 75 pixels right here. All right, so let's save that. And let's go back to our project. All right, let's add an item. Let's remove an item. And there we go. Very, very cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and focus on the second portion of the tutorial where we're going to add staggering animations just to UI elements, not necessarily the iterables here that we just did. So, of course, this could be anything from headings and subheadings to graphics or panels of content that you simply just want to animate in. So in our case, we're going to add staggering animation to 3 different paragraph elements. So let's go ahead and do that real quick in our editor. So let's go back here to our HTML file. We're going to create a div. We're going to add @explainer anim, and that's simply attaching a future trigger name, animation trigger that we're going to define. And then just a div class of call. And then inside of here, we're just going to put a paragraph tag. And so I'm going to simply paste in a blip of content and then copy, paste this in 2 more times. All right, great. So let's save that. Now we're going to go back here to our component file and we're going to create another trigger after this one. All right, so that would be after this last closing parenthesis. And inside of here, we define the trigger of explainer anim for animation. And we're going to put in a transition, again, of any to any. And inside of here, put a array. This is where our queries go once again. So it's we're going to have one that's very similar to the top one up here. Except we're going to make some slight adjustments. So for this one, the opacity will be 0, but also we're going to add translate X on a horizontal, -40 pixels. All right, and this time we don't have to add this optional true part. All right, because we're not going to be removing or adding any elements there. So then query, again, now this time, it's not going to be, by the way, enter. I forgot to change that as well. We're just referencing the call classes, the COL classes that are attached or child elements inside of this div right here. So we have the ability to reference any of these inner elements without having to attach animations onto them. So, of course, you can also reference IDs, not just classes, or also tags here. And you can even add an asterisk or a wildcard to just say all elements. Okay, so we're just referencing anything with the class of call on them. So inside of here, we're going to add stagger, 500 milliseconds. Inside of here, we're going to have animate. We'll make it 800 milliseconds, a 1.2 second delay, and this will allow the initial list to animate in, and then we'll see these animate in after. And then we'll add some easing, so ease out. And then style, we'll set the opacity from 0 to 1, and then translate X to the original position, which will be at 0. I keep on hitting 9. Okay. And then we add right here, nothing. I did have a comma, we don't need that. And that is good. Let's go ahead and save. We'll check it out in the browser. I'll refresh real quick. Perfect. exactly as we want it to be. I'll refresh again just so we can see. Add some items, remove some items. Awesome stuff. All right, so just to show you what happens, for instance, if we take this away, you'll see that it won't work at all. So we need that initial query, and then we add a second query with Stagger in order to do what we want, essentially. All right, so let me get that back. That is it. So hopefully you're able to learn a lot here, and you're going to be able to add a lot of awesome and hopefully relevant and effective Stagger-based animations to your Angular 4.2 Plus projects. So make sure you check out Coursetro.com. Of course, at Coursetro, we have a ton of free Angular related tutorials, as well as Ionic and free courses, and also paid courses. And all my paid courses, by the way, are they're full project-based courses where you're going to learn how to build something tangible, like an actual app or a website that people are going to want to use. And like I said, to access these courses, like it's just like buying me a 6-pack or whatever every month. All right, so I'll talk to you guys later, and look out for more tutorials, especially animation tutorials based on these new animation features, because there's a lot of them now in 4.2 Plus. I'll see you later.